Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of Maeve Fly by C.J. Leede. This is a book coming out on June 6th from Tor Nightfire. It is a horror novel, most decidedly a horror novel. I received this arc from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review. Thank you to the publishers for the e-arc. I very much appreciated it. There are no spoilers in this review. Normally I have some pithy one sentence wrap up for the book I'm reviewing, but I got nothing when it comes to this one. I will say though, I don't think you write a book like this expecting everyone to love it, so that's kind of what's coming. What is it about? By day, Maeve Fly works at the happiest place in the world as every child's favorite ice princess. By the neon night glow of the Sunset Strip, Maeve haunts the dive bars with a drink in one hand and a book in the other, imitating her misanthropic literary heroes. But when Gideon Green, her best friend's brother, moves to town, he awakens something dangerous within her, and the world she knows suddenly shifts beneath her feet. Untethered, Maeve ditches her discontented act and tries on a new persona, a bolder, bloodier one inspired by the pages of American Psycho. Step aside, Patrick Bateman, it's Maeve's turn with the knife. So what drew me to this book was the idea of a discontented female main character because, I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s with indie movies, and there were a lot of male discontented main characters, at least in film and obviously in books as well. So I thought that this would be really interesting. And I will say the first third of the novel is absolutely excellent. The prose is engaging, and I was immediately hooked on the kind of Wednesday Addams on steroids character and the mix of dark humor and some satire. I wasn't as keen on the copious descriptions of LA, a city I have never been to and honestly have no desire to visit. I just don't care. But there weren't so many of them that I kind of grew annoyed with it. Like, some books have a real hard on for the city, and while I argue that this one kind of does too, it was in like little spurts here and there. It wasn't like pages and pages of it. Maeve, as a character, was a great balance of demented and understandable, at least in a sense. Her life is not one that I would prefer to live, but it was interesting and intriguing. The author has a fantastic style that is visceral and detailed and moves at a great clip. Honestly, the first third of the book was absolutely fantastic, and I had really high hopes for the rest of it. Unfortunately, I started to lose interest when she started going all gaga over the guy mentioned in the blurb. It kind of drifted into a dark romance at that part, and I'm not into dark romance. And then by the last third of the book, it just goes so off the rails and included so much shock value gore that for me, it was a mix of kind of like tedious and not distressing, but kind of like, I don't know, I was kind of like, ew. Maeve in the first third isn't a sympathetic character, but she's at least an interesting weirdo. But when the book got really rapey and tortury and included so many long, boring sex scenes, I was no longer invested in the story. The end twist was also very predictable, and I was like, oh, okay. Likewise, while Maeve is very intriguing at the start, we never learn the why about a few things. Like, why does she love her job? Why is she so dependent on Kate's friendship? I also thought the concept, how she's a Disney princess during the day, but a dark and edgy woman in the evening, wasn't fleshed out enough to make any sort of commentary. I don't believe it was an attack on Disney, because we all know, despite how much joy their products bring to children, that they are a soul-sucking, money-making machine. Maybe I just didn't understand what the dynamic there was supposed to be. Like, is it just supposed to be kind of funny that she's like supposed to be this like wholesome Disney princess, but then at night she goes around having like BDSM sex with people? Like, I don't know, was that supposed to be, because like that's kind of how everyone lives, right? Like, we're all different at our job than we are at home. So I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here. I could be. I don't know. I'm constantly tired. Also, I hate giving negative reviews. And I wouldn't really say this is a negative review, because this is more of like a personal reaction on my part. Because as I said, I think the writer, I think she has a really great style. I think she has a very great descriptive prose. I think she has a lot of talent. I just don't think this book like really resonated with me. And I'm just going to talk about why, because this is a book review channel and you might as well listen to it. Had the first third of the book not been so incredible and the second third, still very strong, I probably would have DNF'd the book. But because it was so short, I powered through the last bit that I found just like incredibly over the top, and it was kind of like, ugh, the whole time. To be honest, I skimmed a lot of it. The thing is, if you enjoy really dark novels with lots of gore and sexual content, you will enjoy this. No judgment from me. For me, though, I think I'm done with these edgy books as they seem to be disappointing me of late. I've read a few of them recently and I DNF'd them, and I was just like, I guess I'm just like, maybe I'm too old for this and I've softened a bit in my old age of nearly 40. When I was 21, I probably would have loved this book. I would have like found it very raw and eye-opening. But given my near 4 decades on the planet, I've seen and read a lot of horrible things, and therefore horrible things no longer shock me but sadden me. There's one particularly gross act that happens in this novel in the climax that seems like it's really over the top. Yet, I read an article about this particular thing happening in real life to a woman while she was being tortured under interrogation. I think because I've read so many awful things in real life, and especially at my old job where I worked in criminal case law, that shock value gore just serves to make me disheartened with humanity, because I think of all the real terrible things that are happening in the world today, and I can't like divorce that. Like, I obviously understand that this is just meant to be horror, it's meant to be kind of like scary and gross, and that's like the point of it. I understand that. I'm not saying that this doesn't, that should be removed. I'm just saying that me personally, it doesn't do anything for me anymore. I'm just kind of like, if I want to read about that, I'll just read the newspaper. Now, if these things were happening in the novel for some sort of critique or allegory of a real problem in society, it would have worked better for me. But to have these tortury things happen to innocent people, not as a form of justice against someone awful even, rubbed me the wrong way. No one who receives violence in this novel deserves it, even remotely so, and so I didn't understand why that was happening. As such, a novel about a woman murdering people or harming them in disgusting ways, but with no downfall or comeuppance moment. I guess you could argue the ending was kind of that, but I would hardly call that justice. Makes me wonder who or what the book is for. Like, who are we to be rooting for in this novel? What is it trying to say? American Psycho, which has been compared to, even in the blurb, was at least a comment on corporate culture and comparing the quest for greed and status with homicidal sociopathy. But this novel, I'm just not sure what it's doing, like what its deal is. In truth, I think it's only compared to American Psycho, a book I find overblown, to be completely honest, is because Maeve is someone you wouldn't expect to be a serial killer, just like Bateman was at the time of publication. Back when American Psycho first came out, part of the resonance behind it was the idea that a serial killer isn't just some weirdo, but someone who could be, successful. We don't have that bias anymore about people. We used to think that the only kind of serial killers out there were like these weirdos living in their mom's basement, hated everybody. Or now it's almost like commonplace that serial killers are like, rich people or just like regular average people, and you don't know that they're a serial killer. Perhaps, though, it's not about that. Maybe it's more about how Maeve kind of loses it like Bateman does. Now, again, I haven't read American Psycho for decades because I read it, in my 20s, and I wasn't particularly taken by it. But maybe it's just meant to be like a similar journey. I can't remember. I would have to read it, and I'm not going to read any Bret Easton Ellis or whatever his freaking name is. I just couldn't be bothered. I do think that the novel might be simply showing a woman serial killer who was just born bad. This is an increasing trend in media right now, that we have women killers or evil women who haven't been turned bad by trauma, but who are just naturally evil. This rise is in response to, perhaps, how many male killers we have in media and books who haven't needed to be corrupted by anything to be bad. They're just evil. Up until recently, there was this latent idea in society that women are somehow inherently good. It's a form of sexism. And having just plain evil women in books and movies today is an attempt to disprove that notion. It's actually so funny to think that having like a really evil, mean, terrible woman character is combating sexism, but that's kind of the point. If that is the purpose of this book, then it definitely hits the mark on that front, though I don't think that idea is strong enough to carry the entire novel and the torture and rape aspects of it, because they are very in-depth. It's not just like alluded to, they are very long scenes, and I think that might also be my issue with it. I'm like, it doesn't need to be so gratuitous, but I don't know. I do love things that are subversive and push the envelope, but perhaps I just prefer more subtlety. As I said, this is a preference thing. I just am rambling about this book because I have no one else to talk to about, because if I tried to explain it to them, they'd be like, why would you read that? So I'm just talking to people who might have read this book on the internet. And yeah, so as I said, I think the author has real talent with their prose and descriptions. So perhaps I'll check out another of hers in the future. Perhaps not a shock value gore one. Maybe if they do like just a horror that isn't so over the top. Anyway, thank you to Tor Nightfire for the ebook. I do appreciate it. And I am sorry I can't give like a 5-star review, but I gotta be true to myself, I guess. Just like Maeve, I suppose.